there, everybody, and you're very welcome to the latest episode of the South Tip Arts Podcast. In this episode, we focus on our latest exhibition here at South Tipperary Arts Centre, which is Water's Edge by Ita Freeney, a Dublin-born painter now living in Cork. The exhibition consists of a series of new paintings created over the last 3 years. The sea is glimpsed at in all of these works, but they are not seascapes per se. The focus of them is on the shape of headlands, piers, slipways, strips of water, roofs, areas forming a boundary with the water or breaking the block of water or sky. The solidity of land and the surrounding infrastructure is contrasted with and used to emphasise the airiness and openness of the sea and the sky. This series gravitates towards horizontals, distance, direction, echoes, gaps, openings, and connections and separations. The paintings play with abstraction and representation, finding and emphasising abstract forms in reality, while also observing nuances of colour, tone and form to evoke mood and atmosphere. Familiarity and building relationships with places that inspire has become a very important element in the work. Many return visits to inspirations in North Mayo, East Cork and Waterford result in getting absorbed into the places, observing them from different vantage points and in different lights. The exhibition was officially opened on Thursday the 16th by Catherine Marshall, writer, art historian and member of Nacailica. And on the evening she made some lovely observations about this body of work, a little clip of which you will be able to hear after Ita's interview. I was delighted for the opportunity to sit down with Ita the day after the opening and have a chat about her inspirations and her practice. Ita Freeney, you're very welcome to the South Tip Arts Centre. Just literally one day after your opening of your show, Water's Edge, which opened yesterday evening here, and we had a fabulous crowd in for it.
Yeah, it was great.
Lovely to see the place full and buzzing and everybody really appreciating your beautiful work.
Thank you.
All seascapes. Seascapes is probably the wrong word. It's probably the wrong description for them.
Yeah, they're by the sea.
Yes.
They're not your typical sea and sand. I suppose what draws me is some of the shapes, kind of like a pier or a headland, and that contrast of a horizontal shape with the airiness of sky and seas. I suppose Water's Edge, the title, is because a lot of it is about areas that border the sea, like a pier or a headland, or other things that kind of break the horizon line, like there's a few that are like this rectangular shape of roofs.
Catherine spoke beautifully about that last night, and I think she put it really well, and I'll add a clip of what she said into it, because I think she hit the nail on the head so
great.
well.
Yeah.
About that the horizontal was so important.
Yeah.
And the softness, if for anybody who hasn't seen your work yet, the softness of them, they remind me of a hazy day, you know, the way that everything's diffused and soft, but these straight lines are always present.
Yeah.
And that, I thought that was the way she put it was perfect.
Well, I think as an artist you always want something to keep you going, and I think contrast in the work, so I think there's always like a few different things happening in the work. So I have this kind of lyrical softness going on in the work, and then there's more of a graphic element of the shapes, like you know. And I started off kind of when I was in college, I would have been painting very abstractly, and for a good few years it would have been pure abstract, and then little by little the work I actually, I suppose when the work started, the landscape started to come into it more. I'm from Dublin originally, living in Cork, but I went down, I was working in the West Cork Arts Centre for 3 years, and I think the landscape started to come into the work then when I was down in Skibbereen, and since then it's always been there. So I started off abstractly, so that's why I think shape is always important. I think I'm finding abstract shapes in reality, so it's that mix of abstraction and representation, and that mix of softness and the more graphic.
Did that happen over a really sort of gradual period of time, and did it get to a point where you kind of went, oh my god, you know, I'm not really abstract anymore?
And sometimes I look at the paintings and go, oh my god, I'm going more representational and I want to go more abstract, or you know, and then you kind of go, no,
so it's
go
with your gut. Of then
you
what's influencing, like the landscape that you're in has influenced you to the point that it's almost it's become so sort of ingrained in your psyche that you're putting it on your canvas without sort of even realising it. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. At the beginning I think it was like that, when it was abstract, and then all of a sudden the landscape colours start going into it. But I think now I seek it out a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because I suppose the whole process of deciding what I want to paint is important. So yeah, it would have been more gradual and more just happening at the start, but now I know that landscape is what interests me.
Yeah.
So some of the paintings like might have started off more abstractly, and then I think by putting a little bit of detail in, I'm putting a bit of mood in as well. You know, because there's some paintings that have a distance in them that you wouldn't guess if it was pure abstract.
Yes.
And that distance gives you a mood as well, I think, or so
brings you in.
So it's
So when you're thinking about what it is you want to paint, is that just from my point of view, as I take a lot of photographs, and it could be like it's a split second. It's you're walking down a road and it's like, oh, that's it. You know, is that the way it works for you?
Yeah, there can be an excitement, alright. Like there's one painting, Jetty, that I can think of straight off down there. And it was during COVID and lockdown, and it's an area near enough where I live, and we had just discovered this other area because I love seeing different things from different vantage points. Yeah. So the Jetty in it, I'd seen it from different areas, but not from that particular view. Yeah. But I remember seeing it and the excitement of it.
I know,
and then I think we spotted it in the morning, and we went walking. Myself and my husband went walking around there, and of course he got ignored, and the camera took over. And then kind of the evening light was lovely again. I went back down again there, so there was a real excitement seeing that. And yes, it can be like that. And then other things like a lot of the paintings are inspired by North Mayo. I've gone on a residency to the Ballinglen Arts Foundation up in North Mayo for the last few years. And there's one series of paintings called Landmark. And so it's 5 very small canvases. And that I think is really interesting because I first went to Ballinglen in 2004 and I had this paper piece, quite an abstract, but you know, a little bit of representation in it. And then when I went back there in 2019, I found myself on the same stretch of road, being interested in the same thing, and I went, oh, I've been here before, and this is, and anytime I've gone back over the last few years, I keep going to the same spot, and so those 5 paintings are taken from different years that I've been there, different seasons, different lighting, and so sometimes it's that eureka moment of seeing something, and then there's a few that have a pier in it, and it's going to that same spot again. You know, even though there's so much when I go there that I can revisit, there's certain places that draw me there, and there's the familiarity and then the excitement. It's almost like seeing an old friend when I go down there now again. It's like a pilgrimage that you're going to these places again.
That's lovely. Another thing that Catherine said last night that I thought sort of hit the nail on the head very well is something that you're referencing there now as well, as the light. Yes, the light in Ireland is particularly lovely and changes so much, but like you said there, it's like an old friend. Going back there, I find that on my daily walk to work every day, like things look so different in all weathers. You know, even on the drabbest, dreariest day, something can look so gorgeous. The saturation of the colours when it rains, or a mist out in the sea or whatever, like it's
I think we're so lucky in Ireland. I know we complain about the weather a lot,
I know
but it gives us a huge variety,
and even by the coast then that's even more dramatic.
It gives you a huge variety of things to see because it can be different every minute of the day. And going up to Mayo, and it's different every time I go up there, like, and I've been up there twice in January, once in September, once in August. August can be almost like the light in January sometimes has been stronger than the light in August, depending on the weather. But no, I love the light. It just gives a mood straight away.
And just to get into your head, do you sketch a lot?
I have notebooks, and I take notes a lot, so I might be like grey blue sky, lighter on the left, going into bluey purple, and so descriptions like that for myself, and lots of little thumbnail compositional sketches, because the composition and the structure of the paintings is very important for me. And just because it's a lot of the work, there's a direction in them, directing the eye around the canvas, especially when I have these horizontal bands. And I think Catherine mentioned about them like stopping, so you have the pier going so far and then it stops, and you know, so it's a lot of small little thumbnail sketches and then these notes of colour. And the reason why I do it like that is because they're very subtle nuances of the colour. So number one, I'm probably messy and not organised for painting outside.
But also that's a very quick process, isn't it? Like painting outside, you nearly have to do it and it's done.
Yeah. I keep saying I'm going to try and do a little bit more outside, but I am a studio painter.
Your dad being a watercolourist now, do you ever?
Yeah, I have gone out with him once, twice years ago, and we keep saying we must do that again. But him being in watercolors probably has influenced my work, because my work is so soft, as you say, the colouring.
Yeah.
So maybe that's growing up with that.
Yeah. And when you start off like that blank canvas thing, like how do you approach a new piece of work? Is it super intentional in that you have it all in your notebook, what you want to see at the end, or does it sort of become its own thing and kind of take on its own life after a while?
A bit of both. Like, I would take a lot of photographs, as I say, I'd take a lot of notes, the thumbnails and written notes, and then I would do a lot of paper pieces. So and sometimes the paper pieces are about trying out different compositions and getting things down fast. And then sometimes I like the immediacy of the paper piece, and I kind of, I should have went straight into the canvases, which is probably what the small paper pieces are, small canvas pieces are, is trying to be kind of a bridge between the bigger canvases and the small paper pieces. Yeah. So I do a bit of prep work before, so that the composition, I have quite a firm idea on that. But then when I begin a painting, it changes too, because I paint in very light applications of colour, and people often say, how do you mix this colour and that? But a lot of the mixing of the colours happens on the canvas, because there's a lot of layers of light paint, so it's glazes of colour over each other. So I paint it, but then the composition structure of paint can change, because I'm lightening one part or darkening another part, or warming up one part or cooling another. So you're pushing and pulling things backwards and forwards in the painting. So
how long does that process roughly take? I imagine you're kind of surrounded by... do you pick them up and go back to them later and say, I should have added this? Or...
No, because the series of works I've been working on for the last 3 years, and yes, I need to live with them for a long time. And it's quite a slow process too. Like, there's one painting looking across, and it's up close of a pier wall, and then the headland in the distance, and so it's sky, headland, sea, pier, wall. So for me, it was very much about bands of the colour, and that started off a lot more abstractly. But then when you're playing with abstraction and representation, sometimes, you go a step towards representation, and you need to go a little bit further almost, because it doesn't make sense. So first of all, that block of the wall was quite abstract. But then I kind of started going into more detail in the wall, and I enjoyed that, which is quite a new thing for me, just that nuances of detail within each block, and I've been enjoying that.
Can we go back to the beginning a little bit? With obviously your compositions are so strong, like that must come from the sign writing, just that precision sort of. If you worked with your dad when you were younger, kind of.
Well, we all worked with my dad when we were growing up, but I'm not sure that the composition structure came from that, because he also paints himself, and he would be very strong on composition. My granddad painted as well, so it's quite we all grew up with looking at his paintings and almost doing a crit on his paintings when he came home with things. And he'd have paintings lined up, like 3, 2, 1. What do you think, and why do you prefer one over the other? And he still does still does the same with his grandchildren now. And my niece and nephew that were there last night, my nephew was very funny, because he did a 7 to 1 what was his favourite paintings were and why for me last night.
Oh, did he? Oh, wow. And what did he pick for number 1? Just curiosity.
Jetty, he liked that one.
That's lovely. That is really lovely. They're all lovely. Actually, I'd have trouble. I have a couple of favourites, but I'd actually have trouble picking them.
I know people are asking me which, and I think I'm too close to them still.
Oh God, I couldn't.
Yeah,
you could never pick.
You like different ones for different reasons.
Even seeing you install and the amount of work that you actually brought into the room. All of it obviously didn't end up on the wall, but like you obviously have just a ton of work, from this body alone.
Yeah, well, I've been working away on this body of work, and then I also have a show next February in Custom House Studios Gallery up in Westport. So I was very aware of just keep working. And usually I would be working very much to the gallery space. I like creating an atmosphere in a space, and then I've also done a lot of gallery work over the years, so maybe that informs my liking of a mood in a space, but this time around I was saying, no, just keep working on as many pieces, or just keep working, because anything you're not using here I will be using for the next show, like the next show will probably have pieces from this show, but be building on it, like as well. Yeah.
Now I know you're based in Cork, but obviously there's several locations, and what I thought was I'm looking at some of them going, oh my god, that looks like X place, but I know it isn't, because I know where you've painted them. So there's a familiarity to some of them, that there's little motifs in them and things that are like the red roofs and things that you could find anywhere, but like those little roads along the coast, it could be anywhere in the country, really.
Well, I like that because
I love that about them, because I know where I think they are. And you know, if I was looking at it every day in my head, it would be where I think it is. But
and that's what's nice, isn't for people to have that into the work, because that's why I never really call paintings by the place name, because that kind of corners it off and kind of
it really does,
and even some of the
ambiguity of not knowing is kind of lovely,
like with some of the pieces that have Down Patrick Head up in North Mayo in them. When I went to Mayo first, I was kind of shying away from that shape because I thought it was too typical of that area, for the reason you just said. But then the horizontal shape of it drew me at the same time. But I don't paint places to depict that place. It's painting the place to draw people into the shapes, or emphasize certain shapes in that place that I see, and a mood in that place.
One other thing is, it's fantastic that you can have painting as your full-time career, like that you're actually able to support yourself.
Well, I work two days in a gallery. Okay. In the Lavit Gallery in Cork, but I give them mention.
But the fact that you're able to make so much of your actual own work, your work, is excellent. And like, I'm sure there's tons of people out there who are thinking, how does she do it?
Well, I worked for many years in galleries. So it was only in 2016 I was working 4 days a week, and then I just said, no, I need more headspace for painting. And at that stage I went down to the 2 days a week. So
it was a conscious decision to sort of launch yourself at it full time.
I think now I would have worked in the Fenton Gallery years ago with Alina, and I think when you're seeing so many different types of art, I always thought at that stage that it made me think you can do anything, as in not that
I would have had the opposite reaction. Not that oh my god, your work is terrible.
No, not that you can do anything as in, hey, I'm great at it. That anything goes. That you go with what you want to do, because there's so many different approaches out there. You know. But when you're working in the gallery and you're giving so much of yourself all the time, then it's hard to have the headspace. So what I would have found when I was working 4 or 5 days a week in places, it was the headspace and the stopping and starting. Which I would have found so frustrating. So just working the 2 days and having the routine is so important.
Because you have your work time and then you have your painting time, and you don't have to leave it for 2 days while you go back to do your day job or whatever. It makes a lot of sense.
It's that not stopping and starting, because it's nice to be in a flow of the work.
So it's something that you would be working up to, rather than, I mean, obviously people get impatient in the beginning, especially if they're like throwing everything they have at it and they don't feel like they're getting anywhere. It can be very disheartening for people, but just kind of the realities of most people do need to have a day job of some description to kind of keep the
art
bread
doesn't pay, unfortunately.
And the other thing is that not everybody finds this, as you've so clearly found your own style. I think it would be quite easy to walk in somewhere now after seeing such a good chunk of your work now and go, oh, that's Ita Freeney. Like, people mess around with lots of different things and they take them off, and some people never find their style. But
I think there's been a thread through my work for a long time. Like, it has changed. As I said, it was very abstract. There was a time.
Even when you were doing the abstract work, was it still the same sort of technique of layers and layers? It was layers.
But now when I was in college, it was completely different. I was painting strong reds and blues, which is very unlike what I'm doing now. But they were still quite monochrome, which I suppose I still limited myself. But when I left college, it was very shortly after I left college that the colours became paler, and it's not a conscious thing. I think you just gravitate towards something. So, like, as I say, things have changed in that they were abstract, and there was one time I was painting a lot of mountains and then there was sea. Now I'm back to sea. I moved house at one stage, and a lot of twice that I moved houses, that affected the work.
Wow,
like.
yeah.
The first time, I was doing, there was some things, there was a skylight in my studio in the house, and it reflected on a canvas at one stage, and all of a sudden this rectangular shape started appearing in a lot of the work. And then the series before this, my studio was still in the same place, but I just moved there, and it was looking out on the estuary in Cork, so near kind of in Glentown. So it was
we had those in the Christmas show, didn't we?
Yes,
they were lovely as well.
And so all of a sudden that started coming out in the work. So the work does change, but there is a common thread.
It sounds like you absorb what's around you really well and translate it back out to us.
But you're thinking of, like, there's some artists who do change a lot.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of artists, there is a common thread in their work.
That was a very roundy conversation. It was a bit round. We kind of twirled around. It was a bit of a spiral. Yeah, so your next up for you is the show in Westport.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's in
next February.
So. Oh, next February. So a year away. Yeah. Oh, it's that interesting way to be sort of planning ahead.
Yeah, well, I suppose it might have been better if it was closer to this one almost, and I could tour it. But then it's nice that I can use the experience of seeing these paintings outside of the studio now, and then bring that into the studio and build on it for the next exhibition. And then I'm going back up to Ballinglen Arts Foundation in Mayo for Easter, so I'll be there for about 16 days.
Oh, lovely.
So when I go up there, it's a lot about collecting information, and I think it'll be good, and it's a quiet time as well. So it's good just to maybe it'll be a good time to analyse all this and where I'm going next now as well.
Fantastic. Yeah. You're going to be giving a talk for us on Saturday the 4th of March.
That's right. Catherine Boucher-Boyd. I've been in conversation with Catherine. So.
So if people want to come along and see that, that'll be free and be very interesting to come along and hear you speak about your work. Ita, thanks a million for sitting down with me
problem.
today.
And thank you, and Talina, you've been great to work with. So
you're very welcome. You're very welcome. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
When you're asked to open an exhibition for somebody whose work you haven't seen very much of, you start to look it up. And I looked up. First thing I looked up was the Fenton Gallery's great book about representing art in Ireland, when the Fenton Gallery was alive and really productive in Cork City. And there were 3 works by Ita in that book. And in fact, I've seen them many times because I know the book very well. It's a book I often cite to people, and so I was expecting work that was more in the vein of that early work. This is a lot more figurative than that quite enigmatic early work was, but actually it's still very enigmatic. It might be more, there might be more representation that is obvious in it, but it still remains very enigmatic. So then I had to start to think about it afresh at 5 o'clock this evening, and went off and thought about it. I mean, I had been thinking about it for the past couple of days anyway, and to help me think a bit, thought back to a few people who've written very nicely about artwork that I thought might be useful. And one of the people that I looked at, and I don't often look at him, was Brian O'Doherty, the Irish-American critic who died earlier this year, very famous critic since the 70s, writing about Pat Scott. And this work is nothing like Pat Scott's work. But he was talking about Pat Scott's work, and as a lead into it, he said, and I loved this, he said, every good artwork has a secret hidden in it. In fact, he was quoting Oscar Wilde, so there's a lot of history behind secrets and people perceiving that there is a secret element in every good artwork. And so Brian O'Doherty tried to analyse what the secret in Pat Scott's work was. And I thought to myself, what is the secret in Ita Freeney's work? And I don't begin to have the answer, but I have maybe some thoughts about them. And then I thought about somebody else I know that I'm very close to, an artist who had a show here actually about 3 years ago, Helena Gorey, paints quite abstract things that are drawn from a landscape that is very powerful and very dear to her. And she made a series of paintings some years ago called The Ingredients for Making an Artwork. And she based that on cooking and cooking ingredients. You get your, catch your hare and you skin it and you add a few onions and so on. And also, of course, that was also an approach used by the American writer Raymond Carver for short story, the ingredients that you need to write a short story. And Carver wrote a poem about it. And Helena took it, and I thought, let's look at the ingredients here. So the ingredients are a canvas, pigment, an approach to painting, the means of production. Is it abstract? Is it figurative? What colours do you use? And then there are other things like the scale of the work. This is very small, most of it, not all of it, but small, and then that led me to thinking about intimacy. You have to come up close to this work to look at it properly and to feel that you're really seeing it.
And that's it for another episode of the South Tip Arts Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. On Saturday, the 4th of March, here in the gallery at STAC, Ita will be in conversation with Catherine Boucher-Boig, a fellow painter. That should be a lovely conversation, and the event will be free. Keep an eye on our website and social media for details on that. If you'd like to get in touch with the podcast, the email address is southttipartspodcast@gmail.com. That's southttipartspodcast@gmail.com. You can check out our website, www.southttipartcentre.ie, to keep up to date with everything that's coming up in the near future. There you also have the opportunity to sign up for our monthly newsletter, which will ensure that you're always up to date with the latest news from us. If you'd like to listen back to Catherine Marshall's opening remarks in full, you can do so by checking out our social media feeds, where you will find a link to the entire introduction. We'll talk to you all next time. Bye now.